We like to imagine ourselves as the heroes of history. If a tyrant took over tomorrow, we believe we'd be hiding dissidents in an attic or leading the resistance. It's an easy self-image to maintain when the stakes are zero. This assumption of innate righteousness acts as a baseline defense for our character. Yet, when historical events actually force a choice, this perceived moral courage often fails to materialize. Over 2,000 years ago, Plato explored this tension in The Republic. Through the character of Glaucon, he introduced a deep skepticism regarding why we actually choose to do good things. Glaucon proposed a thought experiment involving a ring that grants the wearer absolute invisibility. He argued that if any just person could act with zero chance of being caught or punished, they would eventually behave with the same lack of restraint as an unjust criminal. If our morality is largely a byproduct of being seen by others, then the line between a good person and a perpetrator of horrific acts is thinner than we want to admit. Once social accountability is removed, the results change. For centuries, Glaucon's hypothesis was a debate that existed only in the realm of theory. That changed in the mid-20th century, when psychology began building controlled environments to test these ideas using empirical data. In 1961, at Yale University, Stanley Milgram began a series of trials designed to measure the limits of the human conscience. He traded the philosophical classroom for the clinical authority of the laboratory. Milgram replaced the mythological ring of invisibility with a more modern tool, institutional authority. He wanted to see if a person would surrender their internal moral judgment when a superior figure took responsibility for their actions. The laboratory setting stripped away the complexities of everyday life, isolating the exact point where a subject decides to follow a command rather than listen to the screams of a victim. The experiment involved 3 people. A volunteer participant operated a shock generator, a hidden learner supposedly received shocks for memory errors, and a scientist in a gray lab coat stood behind the participant, giving the orders. With every incorrect answer, the participant was ordered to increase the voltage. The dial moved forward in 15-volt increments, moving toward levels clearly marked as dangerous and eventually lethal. This lab dynamic mirrors the Thrasymachus principle from The Republic. Thrasymachus argued that justice is nothing more than whatever serves the interests of the person who holds the power. In Milgram's experiment, the scientist represents that power. Even as the learner begged for mercy or stopped responding entirely, the man in the lab coat would calmly state that the experiment required them to continue. When a subject accepts a figure as legitimate authority, their internal moral compass often shuts down. The desire to be a good subject overrides the instinct to stop causing pain. This chart shows how many ordinary people complied. 65% administered shocks to the lethal end of the dial because they were told to. This contradicted predictions. Psychiatrists believed only a tiny fraction of 1% would ever reach the final switch. These participants were not acting out of malice or enjoyment. Many were visibly distressed, trembling and stuttering as they flipped the switches. Their final compliance was mechanical and detached. They continued because of a specific psychological shift. When the scientist verbally confirmed that he would take all legal and moral responsibility, the volunteers felt the weight of their own actions disappear. Ordinary citizens are capable of facilitating violence not through a change in their heart, but through the simple receipt of permission from a structured authority. Milgram's laboratory results reflect the same psychological machinery found at the center of history's documented atrocities. The data describes the mechanics of real-world compliance. In 1961, while Milgram was collecting data in Connecticut, a reporter named Hannah Arendt was in Jerusalem. She was there to witness a trial that would connect laboratory theory to historical fact. The courtroom featured a unique glass enclosure designed to protect the defendant. It was here that the world attempted to understand the nature of a man who managed the logistics of mass murder. Adolf Eichmann appeared to be a mundane bureaucrat. He spent the trial discussing transport schedules and departmental jurisdictions, speaking with the tone of an office manager concerned with logistics. Eichmann's defense rested on a single concept: he was a subordinate. He argued that he was merely following orders and adhering to the law of the land, mirroring the volunteers who looked to the Yale scientist for permission. This administrative detachment allowed for mass violence to be carried out as a series of routine tasks. Eichmann proved that the most efficient way to kill millions is to treat the process like a clerical error. Hannah Arendt described this as the banality of evil. It is the realization that systemic horror rarely requires a movie villain. It only requires paperwork, protocol, and a population that refuses to question authority. Arendt's reporting suggested that the greatest threat to human life is not the passion of a tyrant, but the apathy of the law-abiding citizen who treats morality as a set of roles provided by someone else. This isn't just a lesson about the past. The biological drive to comply and seek approval from authority is present in your mind right now. Your personal ethics are only as strong as your willingness to remain liable for your own actions. The moment you look to a superior to take the blame, your morality effectively ceases to exist. The monster isn't a person you'll never meet. It is a potential version of you, waiting for the right person to give you permission.